short answer, yes, there are rational reasons for believing in God. And so here's 5 of them. The cosmological argument, the teleological argument, the moral argument, the contingency argument, and the ontological argument. Now, I'll give you one of those arguments, but I'll say that the cosmological argument is the one that I'll give you here in a second, but that's probably the simplest to understand. My favorite is the moral argument, because when you talk to people, they like to have strong opinions about morality and what's right and wrong and justice and things like that. And so I can use that to show that God exists. But the most, to your question, the one that's most convincing, I believe, is probably the teleological argument. The teleological argument has to do with the purpose of things, the end goal of stuff. That's what telos means, is goal or purpose. But as far as teleological argument, we look at, like, point to a designer, that these things have a designer. So things that have a purpose are made by someone or made by a mind. And so that's probably the most convincing, because it has to do a lot with science. My favorite's the moral argument, but the cosmological argument goes like this. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. Now that is a really good argument. What we have to do is dig into the first 2 premises and see if they're actually true. And in that formulation of this argument, if those 2 things are true, the third, or the conclusion follows necessarily and is true. But if you'll notice, the conclusion is, therefore the universe has a cause. It doesn't say the universe is caused by God, or the Christian God is the God of the universe. The cosmological argument only shows that if things begin, they have a beginner, and the universe began, and therefore the universe has a beginner. And so when you get into it, it's this backed off, just like it's making a very small argument of, like, God. It's likely that God exists. What sort of being would this be? Well, when you start describing that being, it sounds a lot like the Christian God. But does that argument show that the Christian God exists? No, it shows that it's likely that a God exists that's not a part of the universe. But those are the types of things that we do, is we start making these small arguments and evidences and showing that the conclusion is that God exists. Yeah, you don't want to overstate your case. You don't want to use an argument that's doing more than what it's supposed to. But what that argument does is it just shows that it's one piece of the puzzle toward what we see in the world today. And so I would establish that, and if people are honest with themselves, which you'll find that a lot of people, when you're talking to them, their objections aren't scientific, or their objections aren't actually rooted in reason. Their objections are more rooted in what they want to believe. And so you have to deal with that as well. That's a good conversation to have, and I have that often. But pointing those things out. And so if you make that argument, the cosmological argument, and show, hey, that the universe must have had a beginner, and then ponder what that beginner must be like. Well, he must be very powerful. He must be timeless, because time started when the universe started. He must be spaceless, because space and time all started, so that he doesn't exist in space. So you start pondering and figuring these things out, and see that the Bible shows that, and kind of draw that line for them. But if they can come back and say, well, maybe it's some other God, maybe it's a bunch of gods. And so, yeah, maybe let's talk about that. And then you got to bring up a lot of different things. But these are questions worth digging into. So don't be afraid of digging into them. So I'd have more conversations, ask them what their actual objection is, and draw the line that says, that sounds a lot like the God presented in the Bible. And since you're a Christian, I'm assuming you're a Christian, trying to make this claim, trying to point these things out, you can say, hey, I am wanting to just share what I believe is true, and I want to follow truth where it leads, because I'm a proponent of truth. I like truth. I don't want to hide from truth. Do you want to hide from truth? And that's a good argument.